Welcome to Quality News Network. I'm Darren Lance, where I only talk about quality and the skilled trades and heavy industry, so you'll have the knowledge to get promoted. Today's quality tip is defining the Common Plane Weld under AWS D1.1 Structural Steel Code and AWS D1.5 Bridge Code, how to recognize a common plane weld, and how to weld it. This is critical information for all welders, since every welder will have a common plane weld sooner or later, and are found everywhere. Non-compliant welds will be rejected by the welding inspector and cause time-consuming rework. Alright, so step number 1. New on the job, read your drawings, general notes, code requirements, and client specifications. Step 2. Know your WPS, EOR specified filler metal, and weld size for your specific weld location. The weld inspector will surely know. Now I know the foreman will usually tell a welder to get your filler rods, pull your leads, and start welding at some place he points up into the rack, right? But take the time to know your acceptance criteria. All right, so let's start with the AWS Common Plane Weld definition and then go to some example pictures. Okay, so here's an example of an AWS Common Plane Weld definition, and I used the year 2006 for the Deep 1.1 Structural Welding Code, and it's under clause 2.8.3.5, and then also under AWS D1.5 Bridge Welding Code, year 2002, and the same definition is found under section 2.8.1.8. So a common plane weld is defined as fillet welds deposited on the opposite sides of a common plane of contact between two parts shall be interrupted at the corner common to both welds. Now you notice this is a fillet weld. This is not a full penetration weld. Okay, so let's go up here and look at a common plane. So this is the common plane. It's where two structural members come in contact with each other. All right. However, one extends off the side of the other. And it is quite common to find this weld all around symbol right here. Now it's weld all around based upon the code requirements. All right. So the code requirements says contact between two parts shall be interrupted at the corner common to both welds. So if this, for example, said a 1/4 inch fillet weld all around, you would weld here on the top on this side, you'd weld this side, and you'd weld this side. You would not weld at this corner, but then on the bottom you would weld and then not weld at this corner. You would not connect this top fillet weld to this bottom fillet weld. Okay, so let's go over here and look at two pieces of flat bar put together. All right, so if this had the same weld symbol as here, meaning to weld all around, yet be code compliant, you would weld on this side, you'd weld this side, and you'd weld this far side. You would stop at the corner, and then you'd weld across the bottom, and you would not connect the bottom weld with the top weld at the corner. Now the amount of holdback from the edge, if it is not specified in your current year for your project of your AWSD 1.1 or 1.5, then it would be prudent to put in a request for information to know your exact holdback. Now, as an example, in AWSD 1.1, year 2015, the common plane weld is at section 2.9.3.5. So common sense would tell you some additional information has been added to the code book between 2006 and 2015. So whatever year your project's working on, you want to make sure you're using the appropriate year and get the appropriate information for your project. So any questions, be sure to use a request for information for your project. Now let's go ahead and look at some pictures here. All right. First of all, I'm going to thank Motion Array and Pixel Bay and Adobe Stock for these stock pictures here. All right, so here we have a welder, and I see two locations for common plane. So the first location is going to be right here, right? So not knowing what the weld detail is, but the common plane, this would be a location to interrupt a weld. You could weld across the bottom here, and you could weld across the top where these two members are sitting on top here. Obviously, I do not know what the weld symbol is. Also, here's another common plane, right? You got this plate and this square tubing sitting on this plate. So if it said weld all around, you'd weld across the bottom, and then you'd have a holdback or a stop, and then you would weld across the top from this square tubing to this plate. Okay, so that's one example of a common plane there. Let's go to the next one. All right, so here's another common plane example. All right, first of all, let me just say, when you're welding, weld like the day that you took your qualification test. When you get done welding, take all your slag off. Okay, when the weld inspector comes, if he cannot see the weld, he cannot inspect the weld. All right, so that's a recurring issue there, I guess. Here's a common plane. Now, it looks like perhaps this is only tacked up because all I see is weld here and nothing more here. However, there is a common plane here. You got this beam sitting on this structure here. So along the top, probably that beam comes all the way down here. So it can be welded on the top here and across the bottom here. However, interrupted here at the corners. Okay, so that's another example. Okay, so this here is riveted, but you see quite a few of this configuration in fabrication shops for bolt-up construction. You'll have a knife plate welded to a T-beam or an I-beam. And again, would be your common plane right here. You'd have this, you would weld here and down the side, but you would not wrap it. You'd have a holdback. And then if this angle iron was welded here, you would weld here and here, but you would not wrap the corners here, right? And then on the top surface, if that's what the weld symbol called for, you could weld there. All right, but understand this is riveted. It looks like something very old. All right, let's go to another example. Okay, so here we have a beam sitting on top of looks like a column, and you have a weld right across here. All right, and you can tell looks like it's wrapped here and here, right? So you need to have the holdback on both sides. Okay, let's go to got another view here. And here you can see where the weld is wrapped around. So there's no holdback. So if this was under AWSD 1.1 or AWSD 1.5, this would have to be removed with a grinder right here and right over here. Okay, so it needs to be interrupted. And then here's a fab shop, and looks like some type of a truss. And then up here would be the common plane. So this side here, and then on the back side of that square tubing. But you would not wrap the corners. And so you see where just a small fillet weld, and it stops short of the corners. They're holding back on the corners. As a reminder, please read your structural steel drawing general notes. That'll have commentary on your common plane requirements, seal welding, welding filler material requirements, minimum weld size, non-destructive testing such as X-ray, MT, or PT, bolt tightening, weld inspection requirements such as any supplemental inspections, steel connection requirements, and your applicable code, standards, specifications. To receive regular tips on construction and quality to help you get promoted, like and subscribe. And for more in-depth discussion, join me at Patreon at Quality News Network.